Greetings and welcome to the Halocast. I'm Brad Barker, your host. Please join us each episode as we explore all of the tech, trends, and personalities that keep us safe and help get us better prepared for what's next. Welcome to Halocast number 3. This is Brad Barker from the Halo Corporation here, and I'm here with Glen Stutzky on the line, who is teaching an interesting course on how to survive the zombie apocalypse here at Michigan State University. So get a load of this. This is Glen Stutzky. Awesome, Glen. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me. This is a rather spontaneous meeting you and I have had. So I want to just ask you real quick, where are you right now? And tell me what you do.
I'm at Michigan State University. I'm on the faculty here at the School of Social Work. So I teach a number of different classes. I also do a lot of work around the country on the issue of violence in schools and how bullying plays a role in the development of violence. That's what I do.
This is a pretty big issue at Michigan, or is this something that's more of a preventative thing that you're trying to get out in front of?
Trying to get out in front of, trying to help people understand what are the precursors to violence at school. It doesn't happen overnight. There are things that happen beforehand that can be noticed and that can be observed if you're trained and hopefully, can take preventive measures so it doesn't reach a violent conclusion.
Understood. Now, this is a rather funny way that you and I got together. Now, you were contacted last week, I guess, and from the folks at Huffington Post.
Right.
And tell me how that all happened. Do you have a relationship with them, or did they just pull you out of thin air like they did me?
Well, I have had some stuff on their site as far as dealing with bullying and school violence, but the thing that caught their attention and how I ended up getting with you there is this last summer I did a experimental course on catastrophes and human behavior using a zombie-themed approach.
Nice.
I think that's what got their attention and brought me on the panel there with you.
Did this experiment that you guys conducted, did that get any media attention? Was there any notoriety there?
Oh, it got a lot of attention. It actually, at one point, was buzzing around the world. I was doing interviews in Germany and France and Belgium and New Zealand, Australia, real big in South America, the whole apocalyptic theme down there. And even got mentioned on Adult Swim.
Oh, great.
Yeah, that's one of the ones that I really liked.
So you went from CNN to Cartoon Network.
It's a cartoon, and then Conan O'Brien tweeted about it. So it was a whirlwind, and this was all before the class even began.
Right. Okay. So this is awesome. Well, you're a bit of a celebrity then, so I'm pretty stoked that you got with me here, and we're going to do some fun stuff. It looks like now that you've cleared your schedule and you're going to be on the West Coast anyway during our counterterrorism summit, and you might be able to swing down for a couple of days.
Absolutely. I'm really looking forward to it. Going to be getting there for Wednesday and Thursday, and for the what you guys are doing with the zombie apocalypse. I'm really excited to see what you're cooking up there, Brad.
So are we. So are we. I'm curious to see what's going to happen when this train leaves the station. So I want to talk a little bit or ask you your opinion, because it matters. You're in a position of influence there at Michigan, and you've gone global with this course. And I'm curious as to, is it the subject matter and the granularity and detail of what you're teaching, or is it because it's wrapped in this zombie delivery system? Tell me what your thoughts are on how this went global, because this has happened to us in very much the same way just in the last week.
Well, it's actually, I think, both. Now, the topic of catastrophes and human behavior is of a lot of interest just in and of itself to me.
Right.
When I was challenged with having this course as an elective in the summer, which means nobody has to take it at all.
Right.
It's not a required course. I thought, what can I do? And when speaking with my college-age grandson, he said, just don't be boring.
Right.
And so I looked around, and I actually came across a site by the CDC, and I saw that they were using zombies to try to get out important information about disaster preparedness.
Sure.
And I thought, why not do that with a college course? And then I started thinking, why not actually design a movie style trailer to actually promote the course?
Well done.
So we actually shot a trailer about 2 minutes, got it up on YouTube. That started making the rounds, and that's what started to get the attention of this.
Would you send me that link to that YouTube? I definitely want to include it out in Harbinger so that people can go check that out and see sort of how this thing got kicked off from your side of things.
Yeah, and we wanted to market the class in more using multiple social media.
Mm-hmm.
And so we set up a Twitter account and a Facebook account and a YouTube channel, and we wanted to try to start to create a buzz before before enrollment actually even started. So
Right.
it really and then we wanted to use these social media as also integrated into the course itself, which is something, kind of new. So we had weekly videos where we had actors who were acting as survivors, and we were telling a story. One of the things I found powerful, Brad, is that if you can wrap things in a story,
Right.
in a scenario, that's far more engaging for people.
Sure. Nobody wants to read the table of contents of a textbook and be quizzed on it. They want to be involved in some way and experience it, be immersed in it in some fashion.
And so we wanted to try to do that, although there was a particular challenge because this was online, an online course.
Right.
And so we got nearly 200 students who signed up for this course. That's twice as many as I've ever had. And we broke the students down into survivor groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so small groups, 5, 6 people. And throughout the semester, they had to face certain challenges that these actors were facing too. We'd videotape a scenario. We'd put it up on the, weekly on the site. The students would have to respond to that and how they would themselves, as a group, respond to whatever. It might be a moral challenge. It might be a physical challenge.
Right.
How they face that. And even where they were going to be located. They didn't know where they were going to be, so we thought we'd have a little fun. So we gave them just a set of latitude and longitude. And so from the beginning, they had to actually discover where they were and then take an assessment of what their environment was, what was going to be their priorities the first few hours of the event, what was going to be their priority the next day, that type of thing. We tried to make it online as realistic as we could.
So, okay, this is awesome. What were you doing before you came up with this crazy idea to teach this coursework?
What was I doing before?
What were you doing before?
Well, I teach, regular number of courses here at the university, introduction to social work at the undergraduate and graduate level, policy classes. I design and teach probably the longest running course on school violence in the country. I've been doing it over 10 years now.
Nice.
So doing those kinds of things. But this is the first time we ever tried to integrate social media and tried to immerse the students, even though they're in an online environment. And one of the things I've learned about the online environment, it's just as real as the real world. People can bond significantly, even when it's an online environment.
Sure, because people are people.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, this is just a cross section of humanity being represented in cyberspace. People still care. People still engage, and people are still going to make decisions based on emotional factors. So I want to kind of explore that. So you're a subject matter expert on school violence. Is that a pretty safe
Yes.
assessment? Okay. So whether, just like you were saying now, that having the role players and actors and students contribute online, you still have people behaving like people. So school violence is a pretty large subset of society. It's students, it's younger people by and large. And so now I want to make the case that whether it's campus violence, school violence, or just workplace violence, or just violence in the community, violence is violence. And I'd love for you to explain from your perspective sort of the behavioral patterns that you are studying and that you are teaching in a crisis environment. How do people start to spiral? How do they start to bond? How do they start to cope? And how do they use hope with each other to try to get through this crisis that they're enduring together. Can you sort of expand on that?
Yeah, well, one of the things, and the area of studying disaster and human behavior during disasters or catastrophes is still relatively new. It's probably only 10, 15 years old. So
Right.
we're just really at the beginning of this. But one of the things we're finding is kind of dispelling some myths. When violence occurs, whether it has to do coming from a man-made source or whether it has to do from a natural type of disaster, you have people, because of the social bond, or what we call the social attachment theory, you have people really not panicking. Panic is actually pretty rare, and mass flights out of areas are pretty rare. And that may seem counterintuitive, but the social bond that we've got with one another, not just with family, but also with friends and even with coworkers, and a sense of responsibility is pretty amazing, where people will even move towards where the danger is if there is someone that they care about, someone that they have bonded with. And it's pretty incredible. You have people, the person who stays behind to sound the alarm.
Right.
And there's more humanity than we realize in those times. And then, even when you have strangers that have been thrown together, like these students in this class, just thrown together, told that they were at a certain location, even though they don't know one another, it's like the disaster or the catastrophe speeds up that bonding process. I think in part because more than ever at that point, we need one another. I'm a big believer in preparedness. I'm a big believer in responding. I think one of the biggest assets that sometimes gets overlooked is the asset of relationships. There might be no better investment that you can make than in relationships, because no one person has all the skills, has all the materials, has everything that's needed. We need one another. You don't have to have everything. You don't have to, the one who can fight and the one who can, put together the food and the one who can find the way. If we see ourselves as a small functioning group, I think that's one of the best preparations that anyone can have.
So your point is that you, based on your research and based on the research that you've read over the last decade or so, and what you're teaching your students who take this class, and some of the common threads that come through your exercises, is that a large percentage of these people will actually move towards the danger if they have a loved one or someone that they care about. It compels them to actually advance towards the threat. Is that your point?
Yeah, and it's very important, for first responders and those in authority, to understand that. I think the better that we understand human behavior, then we're going to be able to reduce the number of casualties, reduce the number of injuries, and reduce, damage to property by understanding human behavior in times of catastrophe.
So you'd want to teach first responders that they should be aware that there's going to be people in the high-risk zone, in the blast zone, trying to help.
Yes.
Now, is this hero mentality?
No, I don't think it is. I think it's human mentality.
Nice.
I think it's something, actually, I don't use this word very often, but is actually very admirable or noble, that one would lay down their life for their brother, so to speak.
And you're seeing a large percentage of these people inherently are compelled to help.
Yes, and even in this scenario that we developed in the class, when it got towards the end of the semester, we brought about circumstances where this zombie horde was on the way to where their location was.
Right.
They had to make a choice. Their choices where they could shelter in place, try to fortify, see if they could make it through, to bug out from there and leave, and to try to find a safer place. But we also introduced a third option, and that was, at that point, any individual themselves could break off and leave from the group. And out of these 200 or so people, and we had I can't remember how many groups that was then. There was only one or two people. I think there was only one that actually decided to leave the group. And their decision to leave the group was to go to the location of where their family was to see if they could find them. Everyone else stayed together.
Nice.
When they had the chance, they stayed.
Okay, so what I like here is that you've broken down, just to put it in layman's terms, what you've broken down is mindset.
Yes.
There's a mindset here that if we as first responders, we as people who either respond to a crisis or teach people elements of how to respond to a crisis, if we can break down the mindset of those that are going to be in the area of operation, that's going to help us with incident command. That's going to help us increase survivability and reduce morbidity and mortality because of what is compelling people, what is their mental catalyst, what is propelling them to do what common sense tells them not to do.
Absolutely. And
So
I think that's why it's important to understand that.
So statistically, and I always like to throw Katrina out there because Katrina is sort of a series of rules of what to avoid.
Yeah.
It's pretty much a litmus test of what not to do. Let's do everything we didn't do at Katrina, and we'll probably fare better. At Katrina, those that are paid to be first responders, those that make a living serving the civilians of the country, over 80% of them bugged out with their families. What happened there? Because that flies in the face of everything you're saying.
Yeah, I know, and I've thought a lot about that, and I think one of the things that needs to layer over this is, especially for, and this really has implications for crisis planning and management, is we need to have a better understanding that there is a difference between a emergency or a crisis and a disaster, but there's also a difference between a disaster and a catastrophe.
Oh, nice.
I think that that's part of the problem. When you have, and here's part of what and I don't understand the whole thing myself either, but I think what we had regionally down there was not a disaster, but a catastrophe. And a catastrophe, some of the differences are, well, one, you have most of the community structures and buildings damaged or destroyed, and you have the local authority overwhelmed. A catastrophe is something that happens at a whole different level. You also have help from nearby communities that maybe normally would be available, not available because of the scope of what's happening. So one of the primary differences between a disaster and a catastrophe is scope. You also have in a catastrophe an across-the-board disruption of community life, work, school, hospitals, communication, the governing structure, and you have to have the national government, the federal government, get more directly involved. So I think that that's part of the story, Brad, is that what we were dealing with wasn't just a disaster, but was a catastrophe. And in that way, it overwhelmed the local authorities. And it broke down in a matter of probably even hours. It broke down the normal societal structure and even the normal societal responsibilities. And I think people felt that and I'm not saying it's correct, but they felt that it was so overwhelming that they were freed from their responsibility, not legally,
right,
but felt they were freed and they needed to take care of their own.
They were morally compelled to, that they were, let me rephrase this. Let me try to emulsify this from my own fragile eggshell-like brain. I believe your point is that at some point, when it graduates from disaster to catastrophe, people are morally forgiven for walking off their post. They believe that there will not be a day of reckoning for them because given the situation, given what it was happening around them, they could do no good. So they went to those that they care about, not unlike the students in your exercise. They defaulted to that primary mindset because, again, what we're talking about is mindset.
Yes.
In a way. They reverted back to that civilian mindset of let me take care of those that I love as their primary responsibility. And they completely shirk to the responsibility of those that they are obligated professionally to protect.
But see, here's the thing, Brad. Here's the thing. Within this context of the difference between a disaster and a catastrophe, there was no society.
Right. No, I'm hip.
Society, no job, no authority.
Sure.
And in that sense, they were set free. And when they were set free, then they moved towards those that they cared for, like you said.
Right.
And even if that would take them personally closer to the danger.
So, forgive me, were you or anyone that you put this body of work together to come to these conclusions at Katrina?
No, I was not personally there. I have read from different disasters in the past,
right,
the interviews and things that have been done, by social scientists that have had the opportunity to directly interview those people afterwards.
I would love to see some type of graphic, and I don't know if you have this, because I think it's kind of unique, or at least I haven't seen it anywhere, and I kind of like to believe the illusion that I know a thing or two about a thing or two in this vertical. But I love your hierarchy of nomenclature here, from bad day of traffic on a Monday, all the way to crisis event / disaster / catastrophe. I'd love to see that hierarchy on some kind of a funnel chart or something, and then I'd love to take that once I believe it and take it on board. I'd love to look at the chronology of how things unwound in 11 of the disasters that Halo has personal first-person perspective on. And then I'd love to see where people graduate to the next level. What is that threshold? What is that trigger? What is that line of demarcation? And what happened right before it graduated to the next level? We have this thing that we talk about and that we teach on about triggers, actions, and then policies. What do people do based on the trigger? What is the action that they take or that group takes? What is the policy that governs that action? And how does that trigger another event, which leads to another action, another policy? And then there's that whole OODA loop, if you will.
Yeah.
And then, yes, I use Katrina as an example because it's so tough and it's so, if you really look at the data sets and not the stuff that you get on the news and in the media and what's readily available, if you really dig, Katrina had so many different failings that are so unique to that region because of that, French colonial law and all the parishes and how all the different jurisdictions and all the incident command and how that all broke down. And that doesn't exist anywhere else in the country. And I don't think it's likely to ever happen like that again because we got such a black eye there. A whole lot of policies were just rewritten after that. But from a let's come back to the patriot side of the house. Arguably, the United States is the best in the world at evacuating wounded and cleaning up the mess after any kind of flashpoint. Yeah. So, and I don't think there's anything that you or me on this interview or at the Halo Summit or any of the things that you're teaching there in Michigan, we're not going to directly change anything. Where one of the things that doesn't get looked at, and you mentioned it earlier, I want to explore that because I think it's the most important part of this whole piece, is what happens on the time continuum. If you've got a chronological time continuum, you've got the flashpoint, which causes the trigger and the action and the policy. You got that. Arguably, we're the best in the world at operating in response.
Oh, yes.
But what's happening to the left, what we refer to as left of bang? What are we doing to prepare? What are we doing to get out in front of it? What are we doing to share information about, what we do in our community, what we do from the academic point of view, to just getting this out to our students, whether they go make a living in this space at all? And what is our obligation to talk about lessons learned? Because in my view, I've seen a lot of these after action reports. I've seen a lot of the curriculum that's coming from FEMA and DHS and And a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of really smart people are putting together these lessons learned. And then something happens and we don't apply any of these lessons anymore. What are we doing left of bang? How can the average Joe, not someone like you who has a unique view of this stuff and unique access to some of this information and has emulsified some of the BS and is really trying to deliver some content with some objectives, what can we do as just people on the street to prepare? Because down at Katrina in Haiti, some of these other places, what we've seen from the first person perspective is, you got first responders wearing uniforms, wearing badges that are carrying plasma screens out of electronics stores. And I totally hear what you're saying, and I agree wholeheartedly. There is a pretty good element, though, of people in mass that when chaos erupts, something in their mind believes that they're justified to go ahead and they're not looting food. They don't need a plasma screen. They really don't. So there's crimes of opportunity all over the place, and people just will spiral. Now, what can we do as individuals? And then you had mentioned that we graduate into small groups, and then those groups become, larger groups, and then it's going to be that Darwinian natural selection of whose group can beat up the other group, based on whether we got a guy who can cook, a guy who can fight, a guy who can, put people back together, like a doc or a nurse or, somebody who knows basic, life-saving techniques. What are you teaching your students, or what can you teach me or people that I have access to, what we should do while the sun is out and the birds are chirping and it's nice outside?
Well, I think that's one of the biggest and the most, important questions that there is. There is that disconnect where after something has happened and all the reports are written up, they end up on the shelf.
Right.
On government offices or in academic offices.
That three-ring binder that everybody's scared of.
They're in that famous three-ring binder somewhere. I think one of the things is that we can't overlook just the importance of teaching, and again, this is coming from a social work perspective,
right?
But teaching the importance of having healthy relationships with one another. And I don't know that it's policy or laws that really end up ruling us at the end of the day, as much it is as who we are really as a person. Think of all the time we're putting into teaching people math and science and engineering, and how little is put into actually being good, decent, honorable, people.
Right.
Because if I know you and you have that store with those TVs that are in it, the reason I'm not going to go in there isn't because of the law, but it's going to be because of you. And I think we've spent too much time being too global and not being enough local.
Got it.
Local economy, grow it local, eat it local, survive it local. And I think the more we have more of that local focus on all those fronts, it's going to help prepare us.
So you're saying that from your research, without any training, without any, leading the witness, if you will, when people are put into these crisis scenarios, humans are inherently good and they're going to care for their fellow man innately. That's your point. And so
in general, yes.
Okay. So what you're also saying is that because we're inherently good and we have these innate behavioral patterns of caring for one another and being social and wanting to look after our fellow man, you want to start shining a bright light at that and teaching people how to build based on their innate morality and ethics.
Yes, in a local setting. This isn't going to be a national thing or an international thing.
Right.
The key to it is understanding the locality of it and the localness of it. That's the strongest, I think that's really the strongest thing. Now, let me say at the same time, you're always going to have your psychopaths who are in a totally different category.
Right.
You're always going to have those individuals with a bent towards selfishness and criminality that are going to use the cover of catastrophe or chaos to take advantage of things for themselves. All the more reason why we need to be able to band together with good people in those, in those times.
So how do we exercise that? How do we capitalize on this really good idea you have, and that is to build on our already existing social relationships? Now, we have this innate desire to survive. We have this innate desire and ability to care for one another. How do we build on these innate skills? Is there, your training has exposed that we're not so bad after all. So how do we exercise that? How do we run workshops on that and build curriculum on that and then share it so that you and I are not sitting in our little silos going, hey, I give a rip about you. How do we pay this forward?
Well, that's the very thing that I'm looking forward towards immersing myself in more. I can't say that exists yet. I think it's something that we're actually going to need to create, Brad.
Okay.
We need all that first response stuff too, but we, like you said, we're already good at that. We're the best. I mean, once something begins to happen, we're able to get there. But it's this, as you said, to the left of bang. What can we do to begin? I'm already exploring some things along that way, and I think that we're moving towards there as a society. But again, this isn't hard research as much as noticing people wanting to be together more. We're finding more and more small communities, even within cities. There's smaller planned communities that are being done now, where people are sharing the same little street.
Right.
And their houses are all facing one another in a little elliptical patterns and stuff. And so I think that something is happening, even organically, with local movement. I mean, when you are going to need food, you get in a time of disaster, it becomes just such an important thing. And if you have people, it's like here within the area where I live, within 5 miles, I know of several different gardens that we have that are
right.
big community gardens in that. And we're going to be able to help take care of one another in that. But we're just at the beginning. I'm looking forward to exploring this more. And I'm going to have to bug out of this room in about 2 minutes. We can continue if you want to sign off and come back on. There is one other thing I wanted to mention, though.
Sure.
And that's it, where we're talking about these different gradations of disasters, catastrophes. There is one other level, and that is something you're, doing a little bit there out at the summit, and that's the apocalypse.
Right.
That's another whole level. The word apocalypse from the Greek actually comes from, revealing that which is hidden. And when you think of the book of Revelations in the Bible, part of what was being revealed was the end of times.
Sure.
It was going to be, burn up and destroyed. There'd be a new earth and a new heaven. So apocalypse is actually a whole nother level that we haven't talked about. That is something on a catastrophic level that goes up to the top of the scale, that brings about the end of an age. And the earth does face that potential threat. That's another whole conversation, is how do we as a planet prepare for that? Because it won't be if it happens, Brad. It will be when it happens, It's only a matter of time, maybe 1,000 years, but that time will come. How can we prepare as a planet for making it through an actual apocalypse?
Well, Glenn, I appreciate your time. You've been very generous with your spontaneity and how we got together on the Huffington Post live broadcast and how you agreed to chat with me today and then come to the summit.
I'm very much looking forward to it.
I'll leave you with this just to support your reference to Revelations. There is several groups that I've seen mobilize in very organized ways in the disasters that I've been on the ground at. And this isn't FEMA. It isn't any government in the country where the catastrophe or disaster happened. It was the faith-based community.
Ah, interesting.
And these guys have, when I first saw this mobilized down at Katrina, I was like, hey, great. Wow, boy, isn't Louisiana lucky? Then the California firestorms, I was like, oh, it's these guys again. Then down in Haiti, I was like, okay, these guys got all their stuff in one sock and they know what to do. And I was really, really surprised that at myself for not identifying that. Because if you look in history, it was always the church that was the center of any town. That was the social media of the year.
Yes.
It was where people went to socialize. It was where people got information about the town, and it was where people went for hope and spiritual feeding. So that's been going on for centuries. And so I don't know why I was so surprised to see these folks operating in catastrophes. It was just kind of weird.
And I think that's gonna be part of it. Brad, I gotta bug out of this room. They're taking over.
Understood. You're being invaded by the horde. I can tell. Well, look, Glenn, I want to do this again. Let's stay in touch, and I'll send you an edited copy of this once we're through.
Okay. Thanks, Brad.
Thanks, Glenn. Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks for tuning in. I just want to make you aware of another way you can get a lot more granularity and detail about the topics that we discuss here on the Halocast, and that's from our magazine, The Harbinger. This goes out to local, state, federal law enforcement, military, members of the intelligence community, and of course, listeners to the Halocast. If you want more information on how to sign up, go to our website, which is www.thehalocorp.com. Once you're on our homepage, click Harbinger, and there you can see about a year's worth of archived episodes and issues that include a lot of the same subject matter that we cover here on Halocast. Thanks very much. We'll see you next time.